I am your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. And as always, we have the star of our show, Mr. Homer Smith of Konvergent Wealth Partners, joining us in just a moment for another wealth management related discussion. That's what we tackle here on these shows. Basically, we're taking the same sort of strategies, solutions, even conversations that Homer is having with his clients at Konvergent, and we're bringing them right here to you guys on this show. And for those of you that are trickling in here on the Facebook live stream, we appreciate you being with us here this morning. One of the big benefits of us doing these live on Facebook is that you guys have the opportunity to chime in with some questions or comments related to the topic, that we're addressing today. So, of course, leave those questions, leave those comments below. Homer and I will take some time and get into that and make sure you get your answers before you leave us today. But we appreciate you being with us live here on Facebook today. Hey, we've got a great topic dialed up. So before I bring Homer out, I want to kind of frame it up for you guys. So when family wealth gets, passed on to a next generation, typically we find that wealth tends to shrink rather than grow. Obviously, that can be problematic for a number of ways. So today we're going to be taking a look at just how you can help your heir and your loved ones be prepared and really to become good financial stewards when it comes to the wealth as a whole, because one day their bottom line, it's going to get a lot bigger and they need to be prepped and accordingly in order to make sure that that wealth continues to grow as opposed to shrinking. So with that being said, let's go ahead and bring Homer on and get today's conversation rocking and rolling. Homer, good to see you this morning. How you doing, man?
I'm well, Ryan. Thanks for hosting. Good to see you.
No problem. Always good to be together. And today we're diving right back into that topic of family wealth, something that you are all too familiar with your clients. Homer, let's kind of frame things up for everybody today. We see that many parents and grandparents, that are planning to pass wealth onto their heirs, they've got a lot on their minds. Should they be worried about how the money will ultimately be taken care of by the heirs when that day comes?
Great question, Ryan. And I deal with clients of all different ideas around how they want the wealth to be taken care of after they pass. Many of them want to make sure they can create wealth for multiple generations. And then we have some that really don't want to have any sort of control over the money from the grave. But I think some of the important things to consider with this is there's a survey that was done by the Williams Group where they found that 70% of wealth transfers fail to make it past the second generation, and then 90% fail to make it past the third generation. And so
Wow.
those are really large, challenging numbers to deal with. And the reality is most wealth doesn't make it past that first generation. And so for those families that want to create more of a multi-generational family wealth situation, it is important that they pay attention to that and start to think about ways to mitigate those challenges.
Certainly. I mean, those numbers, Homer, they're pretty alarming, quite staggering, honestly. So, what are you telling then your clients who are fearing that they might fall into this and be another part of that statistic?
Uh, we all hear stories about celebrities or athletes or those that pass away and they don't have a will and no planning was done, and so they end up losing a lot of their money to whether it's taxes or litigation. And the reality is most in terms of when those surveys were done on why 70% don't make it past the first generation or that second generation, it wasn't really because of the governance. It wasn't around the structures. It wasn't around the tax planning. They've got lots of good advisors. They put good plans in place. It's much more around the communication, the family harmony, and really the heirs' preparedness for dealing with that level of wealth. And so that's really where the issues come in. And I think the biggest area that families should be focusing on is how to deal with some of those communication issues, those family harmony issues, and really preparing the heirs. And if you think about it from, a lot of high net worth people got that wealth through running a business, founding a business. And many of them have kids involved, but many of them do not. And so is one of the ways to start to get them educated, get them more comfortable with wealth, is getting them involved in the business. On the other side, a lot of them have sold their businesses and now they've got more liquid wealth. And how do they get their kids involved with the family business of managing the wealth at that point? Is it creating a foundation and having the kids and grandkids be a part of making the decisions each year about how to give some of the money away and getting their first dipping their toes in to being a part of the wealth management decision? So there's a lot of ways I think that families can start that process to start educating them so they're more prepared, as well as just the communication in general between and amongst the generations, so that as things happen later in life, as the matriarch and patriarch pass away, that the family harmony issues have been dealt with to reduce the risk of things like litigation.
No, that's a great point. I mean, there's a laundry list of things that can be done. So let's get into the how really for those older generations. However, how, does or how should somebody from an older generation start by helping their heirs in the right ways, right? So that their efforts are really making a difference and not only promoting that family harmony that you mentioned, but most importantly, making sure they don't become one of those statistics we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think we touched on a few of them in the last question in terms of how the older generation can help the heirs. Whether it's again getting them involved in the business, getting them involved in the wealth management process with them. Oftentimes though, not every heir is overly interested in rolling up their sleeves and being heavily involved in the
Sure.
day-to-day management of the wealth. And so the other part of it, I think that is important is making sure that next generation has a good team around them and getting, much like they did and vetting the types of professionals that they put around them to support and guide them, helping them move in that direction as well and find the right people to have around them. When wealth is transferred, sometimes even if you do a good job on the governance side, people become aware of it and you become a target. And whether it's a target of, family and friends wanting you to invest in their startup venture, or whether it's predatory professionals that are again looking to take advantage of your maybe lack of knowledge on dealing with wealth, it's important to find that right team around you, whether it's getting a referral from another professional within the family, a CPA, attorney, whether it's, you might have other peers that have, been in the same situation that you're in and have a great team around them. Or it might be through researching in the industry and looking at who are those advisors that are prominent in dealing with the types of issues that you are dealing with, whether it's, seeing them in books and articles and things of that nature. So I think there's a number of ways that patriarch, matriarch, or that older generation can help encourage them to really build that good team around them to make sure they're prepared.
Sure. I mean, having a team, you've heard us, if you're a frequent listener and viewer of this show, you've heard us mention that before, that having that crucial team around you, boy, is it important ever so now than in other instances. But Homer, once you find a given advisor or that team of professionals to work around you, how might someone evaluate him or her to make sure that the efforts that they're taking maybe their heirs behalf are in fact beneficial and they know that, they can place their trust in this person?
In general, I think there's four primary criteria that you should be thinking about when
Hmm.
evaluating your professionals, whether they're your wealth manager, CPA, attorney. And the first one is proven integrity. The challenge with proven integrity is you can't really see it until you experience it, which is why I think oftentimes it's so important to be introduced to those professionals through others, because everybody will tell you they have integrity, especially those that don't, right? So I think
Sure.
it's important to have a way to validate that prior to engaging with them. I think another one is does that professional have a deep sense of purpose and concern around their clients? Are they wanting to get them to know them at a deep level to understand everything and everyone that's important to them? Are they really committed to making a meaningful impact in the lives of their clients? That's a really important one. Also, operational transparency. So, are they willing to really be clear and transparent about the fees that they are making through the relationship? Are they open and encouraging to get second opinions on the advice that they're giving to make sure that it's validated and it's the very best thing for them? And so that's an important component. And kind of wrapping all around that is an extremely high level of technical expertise. You want to make sure you're dealing with advisors that have worked with clients like you with the types of solutions that are going to make sense for the level of wealth that you're dealing with. And so that technical expertise is that fourth component.
Makes sense to me, Homer. Do you find I mean, obviously you had mentioned that high quality advice that's so important for heirs to be, factoring into this process. But do you find that today's heirs maybe have other goals in mind beyond just getting that high quality advice and that idea of, hey, you want to allocate here, you want to make these moves there? Anything else in terms of goal oriented from today's heirs that you're seeing?
Sure. I mean, what we find is, even with our patriarch matriarch families, the first generation, they're not always super interested in knowing every detail of every strategy. They're focused on outcomes. Is this getting me what I want out of the solution, right? And I think that next generation is similar. And some of them are interested in going into the details, but most of them just want to know that they can actually have an impact with their wealth. I think that's the big focus of that
Hmm.
younger generation now is, are they able to do good with the wealth that they might be receiving, and focus on the causes that they care about. And now there's this new focus on not just giving their money away to causes they care about, but investing in solutions to the causes they care about, and really this philanthropic capitalism, where they're actually investing in companies, starting companies with a purpose of solving some of the big world problems. And so I think that those are some of the key goals that we see coming out of that younger generation.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. I mean, you don't have to have that direct interest in, managing the money, maybe carrying that family business forward. There are other places you can make an impact with your wealth. I love that. But let's flip the script then, Homer, for a hot second. Surely there are individuals that are excited about taking on that family business or those management and leadership roles, and of course the wealth that comes along with it. What are your thoughts on, the best way to prepare them, for that wealth and them for that next step, which is obviously a daunting one, but it's one they're excited to take.
Yeah, and education is going to be the key to helping that next generation manage the wealth they receive, as well as they need to. And it starts, our recommendation to clients is, it starts when they're young. Whether they're their kids or their grandkids, but whether it's through groups specializing in more of the family dynamics, or whether it's wealth management firms and banks that have programs specifically designed to teach the basics of investing and personal finance to that younger generation. But that to me is really key, is getting them at least familiar with the basics of what wealth management's all about, what personal finance, debt, is all about, and making sure they really understand the implications of all of those key pieces to understanding money in general.
Hmm. Homer, so often we find that there's this common underlying misconception among wealth management that it's just all about investment management. It's all about the investments. Well, in instances like these, what do you find in terms of those heirs that are interested in being involved in areas beyond just that investment planning? That full wealth management approach. Talk to me about what this process looks like and what some of those other avenues that they need to learn about really look like.
Yeah, well, with a lot of wealth, obviously the investment management is going to be an important component,
Hmm.
and having, again, that basic education is critical. But what we find, even with those clients that have significant levels of wealth, from a impact perspective, there's other areas that might be more meaningful in terms of preserving the assets or growing them over time. And so the key areas that they're usually interested in learning more about is tax planning. So how do they mitigate current income taxes and even future taxes into the future? The estate planning piece usually becomes a really big component of it, because if the governance wasn't done well and they watched some of the challenges that come as wealth starts to decline in other generations, they want to make sure they put things in place to avoid some of those challenges. Asset protection becomes a really big issue, and we've talked about that a number of times on the live streams, just around again, as you have more wealth, you become a bigger target. And so how do you make yourselves as unattractive of a target as possible? you know Oftentimes those heirs are a part of the family business, whether it's an operating business or they want to start their own. So understanding the basics of operating a business and or then business succession planning, and being prepared for that is another one. And then a lot of times, as I mentioned earlier, they have a lot of philanthropic goals, whether they're investing in companies to make an impact or supporting the causes and charities that are important to them. And so wrapping that as a part of the overall plan as well. So it typically goes, vastly beyond just the investment component, and really brings in all of these other advanced planning topics as well.
Yeah, I mean, and this is such an important thing to hit on, because when it just outlines the importance of these educational efforts, because it's not just a one and done conversation. There's a lot of elements at play here when handing down substantial wealth. And I say substantial wealth there with a little bit of a caveat. And Homer, as we're bringing our conversation to a head here, it's important to emphasize this point, and that is, Homer, we have these conversations about these, big sums of assets and money being handed down, but you don't necessarily have to be giving millions of dollars and significant assets to your kids for this type of educational effort to be important, right? Like, this is a universal strategy set that should be utilized by all.
Absolutely. Regardless of the level of wealth, there seems to be a lack of communication and conversation from older generations to younger generations on personal finance and how to manage even smaller levels of wealth and make sure that persists through multiple generations. And our schools don't necessarily do a great job of teaching personal finance and the benefits of limiting debt, especially when you're young, things like that. And so I do think that that's an important component, again, regardless of the level of wealth, is what does that communication and education look like the younger the kids are, and helping them understand personal finance, understand investing, understand what starting and operating a business might look like. All these key components I think are important to educate on as early in the process as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Start today, even if you can. Homer, for anybody out there that's hearing this conversation, maybe they're sitting there thinking, wow, I should probably be doing more. And maybe they're interested in talking to you and your team over at Convergent about just their own unique circumstances, and maybe to get your opinion on where they could be doing more to help better prepare their heirs for when that day does come. What would be the best way they could reach out to you and your team to open up a dialogue?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I'll start by recognizing that this is a hard conversation oftentimes for families to have, and there's a lot of moving pieces and complexities that go into estate planning and asset protection and tax planning. And so a lot of people get held up on the strategy, on the different solutions, instead of the outcome that they want to achieve. And so that's really where we want to focus on, is what do you want to achieve with your money? What do you want the outcome of your planning to be? And we'll work on all of the governance and all the details, but really it's understanding what that outcome is that you want to achieve. And do you want to create multi-generational wealth, or are you not concerned about that? Because that makes a big difference on the types of planning and communication that needs to happen. So I'd start with that. So in terms of what we do with our clients, just happy to talk with anybody who's got questions. My email is homer@convergentwealth.com. That's going to be the best place to start. Reach out if you want to have a conversation. We can do a second opinion stress test on your overall wealth plan, and just see if there's any opportunities to improve the governance side, but really also consider what are some of the communication plans looking like. How are you ensuring family harmony and heir preparedness to deal with the other side of this, unfortunately, when something happens some point down the road to you. So I think that's the key.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great stuff, Homer. Thank you. And look, hey, you're a busy guy. You've got a company to run. We'll let you get back to your day. I appreciate you carving some time out to be with us, and excited to be back on here for the next one.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
All right, take it easy, Homer. And hey, look, as always, we want to spend one final moment here to thank you guys, our audience, for jumping aboard and being with us here on the show today. If you took anything away from today's conversation, go ahead and leave us drop us a like, leave us a comment, subscribe to the show on whichever platform you're checking us out on today. And then, of course, share this information, right? Pay it forward, share for those or with those that might benefit from these types of conversations, whether it be a friend, family, or even a business owner. We're taking those same strategies and solutions